Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Starting with Marketing. Today we are focusing on user education and nurturing leads. Today we are also focusing on a use case, specifically a use case where we're focusing on my work. That's also why today I'm not joined in by a guest speaker. And we're going to focus on a use case with Arkware Cloud. Unfortunately, Manolis is not here yet or at all. He is usually present during most of my webinars, and today he would actually be able to contribute a few things if I forget anything, because we did a lot of these things together, mostly him making it possible for me to actually do these things, because as I'm sure most of you guys know, just because you have a great idea doesn't mean you either get the budget for it or the freedom to actually execute it, or and you know, especially when you and the CEO perhaps, or the person who makes his budget available, don't speak the same language exactly. It's very nice to have let's call it an interpreter or someone who's a strong advocate for your ideas. Manolis was certainly that person for me when it came to Arkware. So let's jump in, I'd say. So let's get started. So, like I said, today we are talking about all things user education and lead nurturing. Let's get started in first with what was the situation, who is Arkware, or what is Arkware, and then really get into the nitty-gritty of things and jump into numbers, etc. So, to give you an idea of what Arkware is, this is So I thought I would be able to talk over the video. I did not. I hope you all enjoyed this video. This type of content that you saw in the video is made possible by Arkware. What is special about this, because the video itself is obviously not that unique, is that this is a video representation of what is possible to have embedded on your website. This specific card that you see here. This is not an animation. Well, it is in a way an animation, but it's not. It's actually interactive, which is exactly what you see here at the bottom of the image. This was all created using the Unreal Engine. This is a technology that's usually used for game development. And because you can create fantastic looking cars and buildings and cities, this technology is also used for completely different purposes. Think real estate, think automotive, think metaverse, think what else do we have? Digital twins, and also for courses. So imagine that if you need to have a course on safety on an oil rig, obviously the moment that you're really immersed in what is happening and what is going wrong, obviously you also get to sort of train that flight or fight response that you might have, because you just don't have that during when you're reading this in a book. But if you play this as a video game, you start to get a hang of things and you start to immerse yourself, and it's a far more effective way of training your crew than just having a few A4s that you put into the photocopier and then hand out. So this content is usually, these are files that are 10 gigabytes, 20 gigabytes, not something that you quickly share through WhatsApp. So in order to actually run these things, you either need to have a very strong PC, or you need to have infrastructure. You need servers that are rendering this. And so what Arkware does is that it connects all of these things. So a user uploads their, essentially video game. Then Arkware has all of the software to make sure that you have everything to embed this on your website, whether that is, just creating URLs or any of those things that you can create permissions, etc. But then also they have their own infrastructure They have servers in both Munich and in Los Angeles, and so that allows anyone, even if you want to open this on a phone, anyone can access this stuff. All you need is a stable internet connection, and then you will be able to essentially play a video game that would normally require, a powerful gaming PC. You can do it on a super old phone because it's all browser based at that stage. So there are a few different platforms that offer this type of technology to work. Let's say it's about 5-ish or so, and Arkware is the only one that actually has their own infrastructure. They have their own servers where everyone else uses companies like Google and AWS. And as this is a very technical field, it's extremely niche. Which exact servers, which hardware, etc., is super important if you are really in the know, and it highly impacts the user experience, because if you need to wait more than 30 seconds for something to load, you're not going to actually engage with this type of content. It's expensive to make, so you need to everything in order for people to actually access this stuff so that this is actually used. So what was the status when I arrived? When I was brought in, Arkware had about 220 core users. Those are the people that had the only real paid pricing tier that Arkware was offering at the time. And this number was plateauing. It didn't go up, it didn't go down. There was churn, obviously, as with any platform. And so here, this was below 10%, so we knew that the retention was fine. It could obviously be better. Some of this was definitely preventable, and some of it was just, you lose clients over time. That's just simply what happens. And what was very interesting is that there was a continual existence of trial users, and we did everything to make sure that these are real people. So, plenty of captchas and all of that. And so there was always somewhere between 60 and, let's say, 110 trial users that were active on the platform. So there were definitely signs that this could grow bigger, even though, of course, this is a very small market, which we'll get into later. But yeah, there was definitely something brewing. And so that means that the mission that I got was find a reliable way for this company to grow, specifically sales, because we had this had to be sales led because we had 2 salespeople and they needed more things to do. So what they were really hoping for was for me to find ways to make cold acquisition work, to shorten sales cycles, because these sales cycles sometimes lasted 6 to 9 months, which obviously is way too long for something that only costs 89 euros a month plus usage. So per month, most users would spend 150 a month. That obviously is negligible for most companies. So why is this taking so long? And on top of that, they had several marketing agencies try to crack the code on how to make performance marketing work, which obviously is for most startups the first place to go to check, okay, like how can we make this grow? And somehow this, every KPI was just dreadful. It was in no way something that none of this made sense. So the customer acquisition costs in the end were also way above 1,000 euros. And obviously for if you put in the last churn numbers, etc., then this is way too high. You are essentially losing money. And as this is a relatively new case study, that was already the time that you could no longer pay 3 times the amount that you would ever get for a paying customer. And then, your next investment round would make up for it. No, this was really a moment where whatever was invested had to be used, and then things really had to grow. So what were really the bottlenecks as soon as I got started? So identifying the ICP was super difficult, as none of you, I imagine, have been in contact with pixel streaming previously. I think it's fair to say that this is a very small and unknown type of technology. And the terminology within this field is also super vague. Everyone uses different terms. And because we're talking about agencies, we're talking about studios, they're the same thing. They're just people who work with the Unreal Engine. 3D means tons of different things. Interactive content means tons of different things. And so what this meant is that it's super difficult to go out and do cold calling, prospect companies, create email lists, create drip campaign, cold email campaigns. All of this is just super difficult because it's impossible to figure out who your potential customers are, except for the logos that are on the websites of your competitors. Then most of the people or the vast majority of people who were trial users refused to send emails back when sales emailed them like, hey, I saw you just created a trial account. Is there anything that I can help you with? People just ignored this very, very consistently. Then we also had to talk a lot with the people who were eager for all of this to work out, but they weren't actually the people paying for this. So what happened a lot is that there were real estate companies that, as you might imagine, don't have game developers on the payroll. And so they would hire an agency to create this content, and then that agency would manage everything. They would be the people that we would be in touch with for their account. And that meant that the agencies we would talk with, they would talk with us months before the client would actually sign off on the project. So that meant that we were talking with them, and then we would explain everything to them if we would actually manage to get into a sales call with them. And then months later, they would say like, oh yeah, no, we chose someone else, or hey, we're super excited, let's do this. And then in the end, my apology for my hands moving the entire time. Fortunately, we now have a massive slide to look at as opposed to my face and my oddly moving hands. It seems one of the neighbors has plenty of flies, which means a few have ventured down here. So I'm trying to swat them as I am doing this fantastic presentation. Moving along, the market size is really is a big issue. This technology is relatively unknown. Finding someone in this field is really difficult. My personal estimate is that 0.1% of the people who work with the Unreal Engine are also into pixel streaming. So that means it's really niche. It is an extremely small market size. We asked Dun & Bradstreet what the revenue according to them is of our biggest competitor, and that was, I want to say, 1.6 million. And we didn't even know if that was USD, Canadian dollars. So if it was Canadian dollars, it's even less. This was the company that we thought was, blowing us out of the field, blowing us out of the water. And so everything is super small. So then when there's so few people to contact, you can't just spray and pray anymore. That's not an option at all. But then again, at the same time, there were opportunities. So on the one hand, the brand, people knew how to find Arkware. We had this massive, number of trial users. I know plenty of SaaS companies that would be very pleased to have so many trial users at all times. And at the same time, there were also almost 3,000 LinkedIn followers. So we were not starting from scratch. Then, unfortunately, Manolis is not here this time. But Manolis, the co-founder, he is also very much one of the leading figures in this field. And so we had essentially the fountain of all wisdom on our support team. Support here really means it's not helping with an account. Here, it's very much helping someone either in the Unreal Engine. So it's very much actually creating the content. It is adjusting the Unreal Engine package, that's how these applications are called, adjusting it so that it then makes sense to pixel stream it. And then there's also the front end embedding that some people found difficult to do. So this was very much, within the company, it was called support, but it was definitely far more than this. This was very much, this was essentially having someone for free that was on the team to make sure that the project was a success. There was also a ton of documentation on how to do everything. One of the things that we found was that a lot of the support questions that came in, or the questions that were asked to sales, all of that information that was readily accessible. So that meant that clearly we just had to repackage this information, and then those people would be able to figure that out themselves. And finally, we found out that a lot of these people that we had as trial users, or people that we were actually talking with, they were absolute self-starters. So that means that they are willing to learn, they want to go on this journey, they just don't want to be bothered by a salesperson, as was clear from them not answering our emails. This was also proven by the fact that there was a community already on Discord for us as well, and people are selling entire Unreal Engine courses. So we knew that if you create the content and you create it in a way that people engage with it, they're going to use it. So that all of those four things were very promising, and it meant we got to start somewhere. So what was the solution that we came up with? It was something that I started with when I had to admit that solving the bottlenecks through the sales team was just simply not going to work. It was not going to work for sales. It had to come from marketing, which is something that the person paying my invoice was not very happy with. It was a very unhappy realization, but thanks to Manolis and Manolis championing my ideas, supporting me, we got to actually execute them. So on the first thing that we found out was, if our biggest competitor is making so little revenue, we need to make sure that people become more aware of this technology, because a rising tide raises all ships. But also we found out that on the one hand, we had agencies and studios that knew everything about the Unreal Engine, but just didn't have access to clients. And we were sometimes talking with agencies that had access to all of these fantastic car brands, which really is the bread and butter of this type of content. But they had no idea about how to create the content. They were focused on other ways to create other 3D models of cars. So we had to make sure that those two were more in balance, if you will. And so that meant raising the awareness of this technology, but also of the other technologies and other skills that are necessary to make this all a success. So that brings us to educating users. We had to educate people on the Unreal Engine, on the product, on the Artwork Cloud, on the front-end integration, just to remove all of the potential bottlenecks, because what we really saw is that there were just so many different ways outside of the typical customer journey that we could lose people to either just not working with this at all, or just moving to a competitor because there it would work somehow, or they just finally tried enough and learned enough to be able to get the projects running, and then they'd be so exhausted that they would just stay with them, even if it was a lower quality experience for their audience. And how do you actually do this? How do you educate users and champion a technology that no one knows about and is not necessarily a must-have technology? It is not like a CRM system where, how could a sales team function without a CRM system? This is much more a nice to have. There are other alternatives to offer your audience interactive 3D content. So if this is the best option, obviously this company believes that pixel streaming and the Unreal Engine is the future for interactive 3D content. So how do we champion this technology? That is by building a community so that all of these people can help us with their likes, with their comments on LinkedIn posts, with interaction on other platforms, and ideally even doing our work for us, of course, because if you have a thriving Discord community, it would be fantastic if someone comes with a beginner question that one of our users would answer it, as opposed to Manolis, who had bigger topics to tackle as well. So we got started by organizing our very first webinar, and fortunately Manolis was very crafty and got us a nice camera with the entire setup so we could stream everything through OBS, which meant that we had a fantastic image quality, unlike what we have today. Today, everything is a little bit more tie-wrapped together. It is a bit on purpose, but funnily enough, the rest of our webinar was far more amateuristic than what we have here today, simply because our presentation was made in Miro, and it was we had no idea what people were actually keen to listen to. And we did this through Discord, because then we didn't have to pay for a new tool. And obviously, what happens when you use Discord, where you cannot have reminder emails, etc., what happens is that you have 3 or 4 people show up, and you invested all of this time, you borrow people's equipment. And so here we got really stuck. And here we just really felt like, okay, we had a fantastic conversation with the people that attended. We had, it felt really good. It really felt like we finally had people's attention, and we had the attention for long enough that we could go in depth, as opposed to, like a 1-sentence news blurb. So we felt like the means that the platform was good, but we really just needed to have a professional, real webinar platform. So we did. And that turned into us having a nice little webinar series. On the left is Manolis, on the right, that would be myself, as most of you can see. We had a fantastic office to our disposal with a really beautiful large screen in the back, so we could have all sorts of different backgrounds. We put some random things on the table, like this coin block from Mario that you can press, and then actual Mario sounds come out. And we had a very professional setup, which is something that I would love to have after the summer break as well. And through trial and error, we were just learning all these different things. We found out that the webinar episodes about the Unreal Engine performed much, much better than if we were highlighting users who were, producing really amazing content. But at the same time, what we also managed to do was to have 20 people attend the webinar, where we were going through the entire platform to explain what every button does, to explain why the product is built in a certain way, etc. And so instead of fighting to have 2 sales calls in a week, during 1 hour, we had 20 sales calls at the same time. So clearly we were onto something here. This was working. Also, if you guys have any questions, just drop them in the queue. Just drop them in the chat, and we'll get through those. I hope I am not just droning all of this up, and I'm slowly starting to get muted. I would love for you to come with some questions as well, although I hope that I am covering everything, so that I'm answering all of your questions before you ask them, because that's essentially what we did here. So then, as we already had a LinkedIn account with quite a few followers, we also started to build different storylines there, so that we could disperse all of the information that we knew was missing from our trial users or our existing users. So we were focusing on things like, why do we have our own infrastructure? Why do we not use Google? We were showing that we were working with other people to show that it wasn't just us who were excited about pixel streaming, but also other people. So, for instance, we worked together with an arc where we called this influencer marketing, but we worked with a creator who is active in the architecture visualization world, which is a big use case for this technology. And as you can see, when we started to tag people in our LinkedIn post, and we had nice visuals, and we had a nice story where we could say like, hey, we work together with amazing people, there's things to check out, then obviously we also started to have the reach that we were looking for, as opposed to having these LinkedIn posts where you get stuck at 200, 400 views. Then we were also highlighting other different people who were creating amazing content. The beautiful thing about this is when social media is actually social, you also have a higher reach, simply because more people interact with you, because you have more people that can just generally engage with it, because either they like you or they like the person that you're working with. Then, as you can see here, like posts like this, where we're explaining why we had our own infrastructure as opposed to using Google, that actually still really performed well for our standards, simply because people could join our mission they could join our product, they could join our vision, our journey, and people always want to be a part of something that is doing well. So that's basically what we were doing with the LinkedIn posts. Then we were reviving our newsletter. I'm a big fan of every newsletter every email only having one purpose. So either we were promoting the webinars, we were listing the new product updates, so that people could just easily read what was new, what they had to do themselves, and of course to promote content when we had something that was really unique or exciting, like the video that we worked on with the YouTube creators. We also had YouTube Shorts. Well, we put the webinars on YouTube, as I am doing now as well. And we used a nice AI tool called Opus AI, I believe it's called, where through AI we got to put out as many shorts as quickly as possible, and it all looked very professional because we had a nice looking material. That was also why YouTube was pushing us a lot. And if you consider that the entire world of pixel streaming if there are 5,000 to 6,000 people worldwide pixel streaming as we speak, then I would be quite surprised. I think it's much, much lower. I think it could easily be something like 2,500 maximum. So when per video we are starting to have 1,000 people regularly, as you can see here on this chart, then you're really doing something well. You're really championing the technology. So these are really steps forwards, even if this is a long-term investment. Then, as we were trying to build out the brand and explain our mission and vision of making pixel streaming more accessible, championing the technology, etc., we also had to put our money where our mouth was. So we create a lower pricing tier, which was the light plan, which is the one right here. It's the gray one. I don't know if you can see my mouse. So this allowed a lot more people to actually join in, and it instantly broke our ceiling for number of paying users, simply because there were a lot of users that we could either retain because they would lose their project, but they still wanted everything to be live because they would use it for their portfolio. And there were a lot of hobbyists or people who were just starting their company that could now get started, test out the product for a lot longer, and have things live, and it just would be a lot more financially accessible, because if you don't have any revenue, 89 euros a month is sizable. So then, perhaps what some of you came for is the Reddit little bit. So this was super interesting because we knew that Reddit was a platform that people who were into pixel streaming would be active. On the one hand, because we knew that there were a handful of conversations about pixel streaming on Reddit, but also because there were just at least 150,000 people who are into the Unreal Engine who are active on Reddit. And we found out that anytime we would post something in there about pixel streaming, it would instantly be buried because it just didn't have enough engagement compared to the stuff that's about game development, which is what most people would use the Unreal Engine for by a vast margin, as I've said previously. So we created our own little subreddit. And the first thing we did was, besides just creating some posts, is ask all of our competitors to participate in this. Because if everyone would be, this was my idea, if everyone would be pushing this, not only would we be able to actually just use this subreddit to start using for performance marketing, so we would actually have a way to target people in a way that it would be cost effective, but also it would show why our platform would be better than others, because there would finally be a good way to compare different narratives, and then people would find it easier to make a decision, and we hope that would fall into our favor. So unfortunately, this fell on extremely deaf ears. We were in contact with a lot of our competitors previously, and we had relatively amicable connections, but here it was genuinely just crickets and hay. It was just genuinely crickets. But because there were so many other subreddits that were linked vaguely to pixel streaming, whether it was architecture, visualization, or Unreal Engine subreddits, that allowed us to cross-post and slowly grow the subreddit. So we got to about 150 followers, which is obviously a very low number, but that is also just how small this little niche is. But we still managed to have that reach that we were looking for. As you can see here, we got to almost 9,000 views. That is, compared to everything else, exceptionally high. And it's just that because this world is so small, you get so little views that you're stuck. If you want to champion this technology, there's such a glass ceiling and it's so low. It's more like, I don't know, it's what's underneath your floor, where all the pipes are, etc. So here it's the distribution of the content that we have here. Yes, so the 8.7K and the 4.5K here, those are organic views. I am also expecting some of this to be bots or something, because it is Reddit, so you will always get stuck with bot stuff. It's just unfortunately a part of Reddit at the moment. Let's face it, with Meta and other platforms, there were also times where this was genuinely a thing. So it's just part of the development, I will guess. But still, even if this would be 2,000 real people, that would be massive for us, because the number of people that actually get exposed to this technology is just so low. So as you can see, it was, on the one hand, just showing the technology. On the other hand, it was promoting our webinars. It was going into best practices. This is something recent that Manolis did, where when you explain people how the Unreal Engine works, people get excited, and things actually move forward. So like 9 upvotes for this world is extremely high, simply because there are just a few people in this. And what was fun is that also the YouTube Shorts were something that we could repurpose. As long as the content was relevant, it didn't really matter what the structure of it was. It was just more so, hey, use this button to achieve this. And then people would be like, hey, I might not have noticed. No, I might not have known this, or yes, I also have been using this, and it's just the best way to do things. So what does this lead to? Well, obviously, if you work like this, there is no real way to do attribution. It's not like performance marketing. So if I compare the 8 months that we were doing this with the 8 months previously to this, we would see that there was a 30% increase in average monthly revenue. So it was sort of, so this is, I would say, sizable. Obviously, there are more factors than just my work in this. But at the same time, I would say that this is noticeable enough in order for us to say that this was genuinely contributing to our bottom line. Just like we were obviously getting anecdotal evidence from people who were using us, who were saying like, oh yeah, no, I saw it on the webinar. Thank you so much. I used this. Or when we were inviting people to highlight them, they were super excited simply because they had watched other webinars and they were a big fan of what we were doing. So I would say that this type of user education in a situation where you work with a very difficult type of technology, it pays off. Mm-hmm. We have a small question from Anissa. How do you track Reddit traffic performance? Did you guys use any tracking UTMs? So here, the problem is that on Reddit, on the one hand, a lot of moderators do not appreciate it when you link back to a company page. But that was also really not our issue. We didn't want people to just go to our website to sign up. What we wanted was to give them the information that they needed, that once they sign up, that then they could actually go through the entire process as opposed to getting stuck somewhere. We wanted them to understand why they would choose us as opposed to a different platform. And this is not something that you can track because it's not about bringing people to a website. It's about giving information, sharing information that sticks. And so obviously this is impossible to track. There's no way that you can attribute this. And this was also the big bet on why the person paying my invoices was not a fan of this new strategy, because his ideal strategy was grab the phone, start calling, make me money. Whereas this was, let's play the long game, let's talk a lot about making this type of content, and then hopefully this leads to revenue. And if you look at the charts that I have, but obviously can't share because of NDAs and stuff, everything here has been approved by Manolis, just so you know. But if you look at the charts, you see peaks that weren't possible before. You see a very, very strong growth. Also just, from the perspective of the sales team, you really saw that the quality of their conversations was improving. You could see that there were different types of customer support questions, and also talking to our users, just calling them up randomly, like, hey, do you need something? You could really see that they were telling us, like, hey, we saw this and this, super useful. We saw the webinar there was one where it was about improving the quality of your graphics, and they said, like, hey, once I've watched it back on YouTube, and night and day difference. So from an anecdotal perspective, and if you look at the larger thing, the larger perspective of revenue, this type of content marketing can definitely pay off financially. And that brings us to the questions that are left. I see that I have bored the living daylights out of 2 people. So, So, Ben and Anissa, do you have any questions left? Anissa doesn't have anything, but this is very insightful. I'm very happy to hear this. How does this relate to your work, Anissa? Because you work on a slightly different field. You don't know how to answer that one. That is perfectly fine. No worries there. Then, did you prioritize the size of the clients you were after? That is a fantastic question, Ben. So here, this was a really difficult thing to do here, because on the one hand, the car companies and the agencies that they work with for their marketing, those are the big wheels here. Those are the ones that you want to get. But they live in from my perspective, they live in such a different ecosystem. It seems like they are just impossible to reach. And so what we were doing here more so was trying to go for the smaller players, also because we didn't know each agency that works with car companies. That is a weird, mucky field. It's really difficult to find out, and the only thing we didn't know were the ones that work with our competitors, and so that was obviously very difficult, and it was extremely difficult to get into. We did manage to get into that, but it wasn't through our content that we managed to open up those conversations. It was a lot more that we were making sure that people who wanted to get into pixel streaming knew that there was something happening. I think that also for just having a brand or having a company LinkedIn page and posting is just so important, because it simply just shows that you're open for business. Because if you post there every 4 months, then people know, maybe not reach out to them. They are probably either busy or there's nothing for them to do. And so we were just really trying to make sure that people who wanted to get into the technology, that they knew that there was a place for them to go. And these decisions also for the car companies to start using us, that was it's just this is not something that you solve through content, because there's just so much more going on. Because for them, it's also not, do we use the Unreal Engine? For them, it was a lot more, with whom do we work, who do we trust, and then it doesn't matter which technology it is. I even know that BMW, I believe, worked with a technology where you just use hundreds of thousands of pictures, and the rendering alone costs several hundreds of thousands. And for them to switch to this, which would be a lot cheaper, um, for them that wasn't a thing, because the costs for the content were a rounding error to begin with. So why would we optimize this, right? This just didn't really make a difference. I hope that answers your question, Ben. One thing I would like to add here, Anissa, about the Reddit subreddit is about our own subreddit, is that it was very much our intention to not be the only people posting in there. That is actually what happened, which obviously isn't great, because a community thrives on diversity, different opinions, etc. And so we wanted people to be able to promote themselves as well, simply because we knew that we were not going to get a lot of engagement, because these people are quite shy, unless you have them on a one-on-one, and then they talk your head off. So we just needed to make sure that there was a lot happening, and we were hoping people would jump in. This did not happen as much as we wanted, and so that meant that there were posts from other people on there. We also did have a handful of people who were saying things like, "Oh, I hate this and this about pixel streaming," and then we would be able to say, "Oh, but we actually solved this." Those type of things did happen, but it was not nearly enough to really say, like, okay, we have a really thriving community. What we did have was a way to put stuff out there and actually have it reach people, because even if that wouldn't solve everything, it would certainly still be better than just sitting on our hands and not doing anything. A lot of this is very much anti-Reddit in a way. Reddit is very much, hey, let's have other people lead the conversation for us and just sort of steer it a little bit. We went the exact opposite. We also actually had people complain that this was an Arkware-only subreddit, even though it was the name of the total category that the subreddit had. But as soon as we just said, like, look, we invited everyone, but no one's participating, they were instantly like, "Oh, sorry, so sorry. No, thank you so much for starting this." And so, this is part of, these are growing pains, these are starting pains, and it's all part of the game. It is, however, a pity that this world is just so, it is very easy for it to get stale, because people are either working on things or there's just not a lot happening. It's not exactly a thriving marketplace. Reddit is also crawled by AI. I know at least Gemini and Google's AI search engine quote Reddit, LinkedIn, Substack. Yes, that is very true. It is actually the biggest UGC platform for all of the LLMs. We have a fantastic webinar about that on our YouTube page. Oh, fantastic. I get to promote some stuff that we do. About all of that, we have it with Vlad Schvetz from, was a very German pronunciation. That would be here. Let me just view your channel, get you the link. You Reddit ads, Reddit for copy link, boom. Ta-da! So that is a previous webinar that we did where we were going into how this whole AEO, GEO works. And Vlad has some really amazing insights on there. Big fan of his work and his tool called Query, I believe it is pronounced. Really interesting, thanks. You didn't mention paid ads. Did you try out Google Ads, LinkedIn ads, etc.? Yes. So Ben, this is indeed something that I wanted to touch upon in the webinar, but didn't because I forgot. So the problem is that the people who actually create the content are not the people who buy or select the pixel streaming platform. So what that means is that you have people who have super generic job titles, and those are impossible to find. So according to the targeting options from LinkedIn, it's impossible to find someone who is going to be a decision maker, who works in this field, And it meant that indeed you would have these extremely low CTRs because the number of people that could be found that are interested in this topic at this specific moment and are then also inclined to click on your ad, that is just, you get to these CTRs that don't make any sense, to with CPCs that don't make any sense. It is just absolutely horrific. And that meant that LinkedIn was completely off, out of bounds. And then Google Ads is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, because on the one hand, this should absolutely be the place to advertise. And I have not seen any campaign either from previous agencies or the agency that was there while I was also there. None of them worked. I don't really know why. I think it is the case because these people are nicely jaded, which means that sometimes they make for great conversational partners. But they didn't really like ads. They didn't really interact with it. And I think that Arkware already had so much brand awareness that it didn't really do much for us. And so that was a really weird situation, because I still can't believe that Google ads or search ads didn't work out here. The only thing which I might have wanted to use but didn't was YouTube ads, specifically for videos with specific topics. That's something that I might have tried were I to have tried it again together with Manolis to get the performance marketing going. We might also try a little bit with the webinars to promote the webinars directly as opposed to the product. I don't think those would be successful, simply because the targeting options are still the issue, but it might have created more interest in pixel streaming amongst people who didn't know about it, but would then be able to explain to other people that this exists. So that is something that I might have wanted to do, to have more game developers attend our webinars, but I know that wouldn't have brought in any revenue. And the problem here is that for performance marketing, you just need to have a market size of a specific size. Like, you really need to be able to target at least 50,000 people. And with pixel streaming, I think this is just so much smaller. And the funny thing is, I think that this size issue is getting more and more common. I recently also worked with a company that has a tool to help you make websites become accessible for people with handicaps or the differently abled, whatever the correct terminology for that in English is. In German, the client was German. It is barrierefrei, so free of limitations or free of barriers. And there as well, like, because the topic is so specific within the larger fields of making websites, it was really difficult to really target people who were into this. And I know in the UK it's a lot more of a topic because you guys have legal obligations here. And in Germany, you start to have those, and they're sort of enforced, but not really. Because legally, for years, almost every web shop should already have gotten very large fines for not having websites like this. But there as well, we got into a similar situation, which is why it was so funny that it was so much easier to get them through webinars. So Anissa is already late. Yes, the cat is asking for dinner. Those are very pesky clients to have. Then see you next time, Anissa. Ben, is there anything left that you want me to answer? Or is there anything you want to tell me? I mean, this goes both ways. Then, good. Thanks for the session, Ben. It was a pleasure to have you. Thanks for everyone who tuned in on YouTube. See each other next time, right? We're going to take a small summer break, and then we will be there again in September. We already have something for Google Ads, so check your old emails if you're already part of our community. if you want to jump into that one. Ben, it was a pleasure to have you. See you next time.